The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 miles of polished crystal and living metal. Beings from 1,000 worlds gathered here to decide the fate of civilizations. They had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, and in all that time, they had never once been wrong about anything that mattered. High Arbiter Velthax floated at the center of the chamber, his massive body supported by gravity fields that hummed with quiet power. His skin shifted colors as he processed information, moving through shades of blue and purple that indicated deep thought. Around him, representatives from the 12 founding species waited in respectful silence. "Show me this human," Velthax commanded. The holographic display flickered to life, projecting an image that filled the center of the chamber. A man appeared before them, life-sized and perfect in every detail. He was standing in a small kitchen, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. His hair was going gray at the temples. His hands were rough and calloused from years of physical work. He wore a faded t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days. John Morrison, 43 years old. Former construction foreman from a small town in Ohio. Currently unemployed after his company went out of business. No wife, no children, no particular skills that set him apart from billions of other humans on that unremarkable planet called Earth. Counselor Zix, the intelligence officer who had called this meeting, stepped forward nervously. The Ythrani were a cautious species by nature, and Zix was more cautious than most. That caution had served him well over 300 years of service to the Council. "High Arbiter," Zix began, his thin voice carrying through the chamber. "Our predictive algorithms flagged this human 6 cycles ago. There is something unusual about his probability matrix. The projections suggest that he may interact with our expansion efforts in ways we cannot fully predict." Velthax made a sound that might have been laughter. "This creature? Look at him, Counselor. He's drinking a stimulant beverage and staring at a communication screen. What threat could he possibly pose to the hegemony?" "I cannot say with certainty, High Arbiter. That is precisely what concerns me. The algorithms have never produced such uncertain results before." The other representatives began to murmur among themselves. The Garati hegemony had conquered over 800 worlds using those algorithms. They could predict the rise and fall of empires, the outcomes of wars that had not yet begun, the emergence of threats centuries before they materialized. The idea that one human could create uncertainty was almost insulting. Velthax studied the holographic image for a long moment. John Morrison had finished his coffee and was now sitting on a worn couch, flipping through channels on his television. He paused on a sports program, watching men chase a ball across a grass field. His expression was empty, distant. He looked like a man who had given up on life. "I have reviewed his complete file," Velthax announced. "This human has no military training. He has no political connections. His intelligence scores place him exactly in the middle range for his species. He spends his evenings consuming fermented grain beverages with other laborers. He has failed at marriage, failed at maintaining stable employment, and failed at every significant endeavor he has undertaken." The High Arbiter's skin flushed a deep crimson, indicating his final judgment. "I declare this human to be Category 9, no threat. His file will be archived. We will waste no more resources monitoring him." The vote was unanimous. Every representative raised their appendage or tentacle or energy field in agreement. John Morrison was officially classified as inconsequential. His file disappeared into the vast archives of the Galactic Council, buried among billions of other forgotten assessments, 3,000 light years away. John Morrison turned off his television and walked to his front door. A postal worker had just dropped something through the mail slot. He picked up the envelope and saw the official seal of the United States Department of Defense. His hands began to shake as he opened it. The letter was short and formal. It expressed condolences for his loss. It informed him that his brother, Sergeant Danny Morrison, had been killed during a classified incident at a research facility in Nevada. No further details could be provided at this time. A flag would be sent to their mother's address. Benefits information was enclosed. John read the letter 3 times. Each time, the words made less sense. Danny had been stationed at a research facility. He was not in a combat zone. He was not involved in any dangerous operations. He was a technician, for God's sake. He fixed computers and maintained equipment. He was supposed to be safe. John sat down heavily on his couch, still holding the letter. His mind raced through possibilities. An accident? An explosion? Some kind of equipment failure? But if it was something simple like that, why was it classified? Why couldn't they tell him what happened? He thought about his brother. Danny was 8 years younger, the baby of the family. He had always been the smart one, the one who was going to make something of himself. He had joined the army to pay for college, planning to become an engineer. He called John every Sunday without fail, talking about his work in ways that were vague, but always enthusiastic. The last call had been different. Danny had sounded strange, almost frightened. He had asked John if he believed in things that seemed impossible. John had laughed and asked if his little brother was losing his mind. Danny had laughed too, but there was no humor in it. That was 3 weeks ago. Now Danny was dead, and no one would tell John why. He looked around his empty apartment. He had nothing left. No job, no family nearby, no purpose. His mother had passed 2 years ago. His father had been gone since they were children. His ex-wife Linda had moved to California with a man who sold insurance. His friends had drifted away after he lost his job, but he had one thing left. He had questions. And John Morrison had never been very good at leaving questions unanswered. He picked up his phone and dialed the number on the letter. A recorded message told him that all information regarding the incident was classified and could not be discussed. He hung up and dialed another number, this one for a Veterans Affairs office. They were very sorry for his loss, but could not help him. John sat in the growing darkness of his apartment, turning the letter over in his hands. Somewhere out there, someone knew what had happened to his brother. Someone knew the truth. He made a decision that would change the course of human history, though he did not know it yet. He was going to find that truth, no matter what it cost him. The Galactic Council had declared him inconsequential. They had filed him away and forgotten about him. They had made the biggest mistake of their 10,000-year reign. 5 years changed everything. The world that John Morrison had known was gone, replaced by something new and strange and full of purpose. Cities that had once competed against each other now worked together. Scientists who had guarded their research now shared it freely. Factories that had built consumer goods now built something else entirely. Humanity was preparing for war. John stood at the window of his office in the underground command center, watching crews work on the latest batch of fighter craft. The facility stretched for miles beneath the Swiss Alps, a marvel of engineering that had been built in just 3 years. Similar facilities existed on every continent, connected by tunnels and communication networks that spanned the globe. He was no longer the broken man who had received that letter about his brother. 5 years of leading humanity's defense initiative had changed him. His hair was fully gray now, and deep lines marked his face. But his eyes were sharp and clear, filled with a determination that had only grown stronger with time. Amy Porter entered his office without knocking. She never knocked. As chief of engineering for the entire initiative, she had earned the right to go wherever she wanted. "The new drive systems are ready for testing," she announced, dropping a tablet on his desk. "If these work the way I think they will, we can have ships capable of faster-than-light travel within 6 months." John picked up the tablet and studied the specifications. Amy had started as a NASA engineer, brilliant but frustrated by limited budgets and political interference. Now she commanded a research division larger than most corporations, with resources that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. "How confident are you?" he asked. 90%. Maybe 95. We'd been studying the captured vessel for years, and we finally cracked the core principles. The Karathi use a completely different approach to physics than anything we ever imagined. It took us a while to understand it, but once we did. She smiled, the expression of a scientist who had solved an impossible puzzle. Let's just say that Einstein was only seeing part of the picture. The door opened again, and Frank Casey walked in. The retired Marine general had become John's military advisor 2 years ago, after the previous advisor suffered a heart attack. Frank was old school, a warrior from a time before the revelation, but he had adapted quickly to the new reality. "We've got a problem," Frank said. He was not a man who wasted words. Pete's team intercepted new transmissions. "The Karathi are moving." John felt his stomach tighten. They had known this day would come. All their preparations had been aimed at this moment. But knowing something and facing it were very different things. How long? 6 months. Maybe less. They're assembling a fleet at their staging point in the Tau Ceti system. 300 warships, possibly more. 300 warships. Each one built by a civilization that had been conquering worlds before humans learned to write. Each one carrying weapons that could reduce a city to ash in seconds. John looked at his 2 advisors, then at the tablet showing Amy's breakthrough. 6 months to finish developing faster than light travel. 6 months to build enough ships to defend an entire planet. 6 months to prepare for an enemy that had never lost a war in 10,000 years. "Then we'd better work fast," he said. The next 6 months were the most intense in human history. Factories ran around the clock in every country. Scientists worked themselves to exhaustion and then kept going. Old rivalries were forgotten as former enemies worked side by side toward a common goal. Katie Dunn, now leading the intelligence division, built a network of listening posts that monitored every signal coming from deep space. Her team had cracked the Karathi encryption 2 years ago, a breakthrough that gave humanity an advantage their enemies did not suspect. "They think we're still fighting among ourselves," Katie reported during one of the daily briefings. Their intelligence reports describe ongoing conflicts, social breakdown, technological regression. Everything they expected to see. John nodded. Good. Let them believe it. The deception had been Pete Lawson's idea. While humanity secretly prepared for war, they also created a false image for their watchers to see. Staged conflicts, fake news reports, carefully managed social media campaigns. The Karathi were seeing exactly what they expected, which meant they were not seeing the truth. Pete himself rarely left his monitoring station anymore. He had changed since the early days, becoming quieter and more focused. The fear that had once haunted him was gone, replaced by cold determination. "I've been analyzing their tactical patterns," he said during a late-night meeting. "The Karathi have conquered over 800 worlds. They always use the same approach. Overwhelming force, quick strikes on command centers, psychological warfare to break resistance. And our counter-strategy?" Pete pulled up a display showing his analysis. "We use their assumptions against them. They expect us to be disorganized and primitive. They expect our technology to be centuries behind theirs. They expect an easy victory." He smiled, a thin expression that held no warmth. "We're going to give them something they've never faced before. The species that learn from their own communications how to beat them." The final months passed in a blur of preparation. Amy's drive systems worked exactly as she predicted. Frank's defense networks came online ahead of schedule. Katie's intelligence team provided a constant stream of information about enemy movements and plans. And through it all, John Morrison worked. He met with world leaders who looked to him for guidance. He visited factories and research facilities to boost morale. He gave speeches that were broadcast to every corner of the globe, reminding people what they were fighting for. On the night before the invasion was expected to arrive, John visited the memorial that had been built for the victims of the Nevada incident. 17 names were carved into black stone, including Danny Morrison. He stood there for a long time, alone in the darkness. "I don't know if we're going to win," he said quietly to his brother's name. "I don't know if anything we've built will be enough. But I promise you this, Danny. We're not going down without a fight. And whatever happens tomorrow, the galaxy is going to remember what humans are capable of." The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant. Somewhere among them, a fleet of 300 warships was approaching Earth, ready to finish what they had started. They had no idea what was waiting for them. 6 months had passed since the letter arrived. John Morrison had lost almost everything in his search for the truth. His savings account was empty. His credit cards were maxed out. His apartment was gone, replaced by a series of cheap motel rooms that smelled like cigarette, smoke, and despair. But he had found something. It started with small things. A name mentioned in a news article that had been quickly deleted. A former soldier who agreed to meet him in a parking lot and spoke in whispers about things he had seen. A pattern of deaths among researchers who had worked at facilities that did not officially exist. Each piece of information led to another. Each answered question created 10 more. John followed the trail like a man possessed, because in many ways he was. His brother's ghost drove him forward, demanding answers that no one wanted to give. The breakthrough came through a woman named Katie Dunn. She was a journalist who had spent 15 years investigating government secrets. Her career had been destroyed when she got too close to something important. Now she worked from a small office in Baltimore, publishing articles on a website that most people dismissed as conspiracy nonsense. But Katie Dunn was not crazy. She was careful, methodical, and very good at finding information that powerful people wanted to stay hidden. "You're not the first person to come to me about that facility," she told John during their first meeting. They sat in a diner on the outskirts of the city, speaking in low voices. "3 others have contacted me over the past 2 years. 2 of them disappeared. The third one, well, let's just say he decided to stop asking questions." John leaned forward. "What do you know about it?" "I know that something happened there 18 months ago. Something big. The official records show a fire in a storage building, quickly contained, no casualties. But hospital records from 3 nearby cities show a sudden spike in patients with radiation burns and unusual symptoms. Records that were sealed by federal order within 48 hours. Radiation? What kind of research were they doing?" Katie smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That's the question, isn't it?" She introduced John to Pete Lawson, a former analyst who had worked for one of the intelligence agencies. Pete had left the government 5 years ago after seeing something that changed his understanding of reality. He never talked about what it was, but the fear in his eyes told John everything he needed to know. The 3 of them worked together through the long winter months. Pete used his old contacts to gather information. Katie used her journalist skills to verify and connect the pieces. And John did what he had always done best. He looked at all the pieces and figured out how they fit together. The picture that emerged was impossible. And yet, it was also undeniable. "You need to understand what we're dealing with here," Pete said one night. They were gathered in a motel room. Documents spread across every surface. Pete's hand shook as he pointed to energy readings that made no sense according to known physics. "This isn't just government black ops. This isn't secret weapons research. This is something else entirely." Katie stared at the documents. Her face had gone pale. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that the facility where Danny Morrison died was studying something that did not come from Earth. John felt the world shift beneath him. He had prepared himself for many possibilities. A cover-up of dangerous experiments. A conspiracy reaching the highest levels of government. But this was beyond anything he had imagined. You're talking about aliens, he said slowly. Pete nodded. I'm talking about a crashed vessel that was recovered 8 years ago. I'm talking about technology that our best scientists cannot begin to understand. And I'm talking about something that happened when they tried to activate one of its systems. He pulled out a photograph. It showed the interior of a massive hangar, and at its center sat something that could not have been built by human hands. The vessel was smooth and organic looking, like a living thing frozen in metal. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with inner light. Danny was there when it happened, Pete continued. He was part of the technical team monitoring the activation attempt. According to the classified report I managed to obtain, the vessel's automated defense systems came online without warning. 17 people died in less than 3 seconds, including your brother. John took the photograph with trembling hands. His brother had died in that room, killed by something from another world. Killed and then buried under layers of lies and secrecy. There's more, Katie said quietly. Pete found communications intercepts. Signals that have been detected coming from deep space over the past 2 decades. Signals that match the patterns found in the vessel systems. What does that mean? It means we're not alone out here. And it means that whoever built that vessel knows we have it. John looked at his 2 companions. Katie, who had sacrificed her career searching for truths that others wanted hidden. Pete, who lived in constant fear of the things he had seen. They had given him the answers he sought, but those answers had only created bigger questions. What do we do with this? He asked. Katie and Pete exchanged a look. It was Katie who finally spoke. We have 3 options. We can walk away and pretend we never learned any of this. We can try to dig deeper, knowing that the people who killed those 17 researchers will eventually find us. Or, she paused, taking a deep breath. Or we can tell the world. Tell the world. How? I still have contacts in the media. Real journalists who would risk everything for a story this big. Pete has documentation that proves the cover-up. And you. She looked at John with something like respect. You have a story that people will believe. A brother who died. A family destroyed by lies. That's the kind of thing that makes people pay attention. John thought about Danny. He thought about the life his brother should have had. The children he would never father. The dreams he would never achieve. All of it taken away by secrets that powerful people wanted to keep. Let's tell the world, he said. None of them knew that their conversation was being monitored. Not by their own government, but by something far more ancient and powerful. The Galactic Council had automated systems watching Earth. Systems that flagged certain keywords and patterns. John Morrison's file was pulled from the archives. A new assessment was ordered, but by the time the council realized their mistake, it would already be too late. The world changed on a Tuesday afternoon in September. The sky was clear and blue over Washington, D.C., the kind of perfect autumn day that made people believe anything was possible. Inside the National Press Club, 200 journalists waited for a press conference that had been announced only 12 hours earlier. John Morrison stood behind a curtain, trying to control his breathing. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. In a few minutes, he would walk out onto that stage and say things that could not be unsaid. He would either change the world or destroy what little remained of his life. Katie Dunn put a hand on his shoulder. You ready for this? No, John admitted. But I'm going to do it anyway. Pete Lawson was already at the computer station, preparing the files they would show. Behind them stood Greg Holland, a former Air Force captain who had witnessed the Nevada incident and agreed to testify. His hands were steady, but his eyes showed the fear of a man who knew exactly what he was risking. The press conference began at 2:00 exactly. John walked to the podium and looked out at the sea of faces. Cameras flashed. Microphones pointed at him like weapons. The whole world was watching, though most of them did not know it yet. "My name is John Morrison," he began. His voice was rough and unpolished, nothing like the smooth speakers who usually stood at this podium. 8 months ago, my brother Danny was killed at a government facility in Nevada. I was told it was a classified incident. No details, no explanation, nothing. Just a letter and a folded flag. He paused, gathering himself. I spent the last 8 months finding out what really happened. And what I found, well, it's going to be hard to believe. But I have evidence. I have witnesses. And I have the truth. For the next 2 hours, they laid it all out. Pete showed the energy readings, the communications intercepts, the technical analysis of technologies that could not have been invented by human science. Katie presented the documents proving the cover-up, the sealed records, the pattern of silenced witnesses. Greg Holland described what he had seen with his own eyes, his voice breaking as he talked about friends who had died in that hangar. And then they showed the video. It had taken Pete 3 months to obtain the footage. It came from a security camera inside the Nevada facility, recorded on the day of the incident. The quality was poor, but the content was unmistakable. A massive hangar. A vessel that looked like nothing from Earth. Scientists and technicians working around it, taking readings, connecting equipment. And then the activation. A pulse of light that filled the screen. Bodies falling. Chaos. The footage cut out after 37 seconds. But those 37 seconds were enough. The room exploded with questions. Journalists shouted over each other, demanding answers, challenging the evidence, some laughing in disbelief. But John could see it in their eyes. They knew. On some deep level, they all knew this was real. Within hours, the story had spread to every corner of the planet. Television networks interrupted their programming. Social media platforms crashed under the weight of traffic. World leaders issued statements ranging from denial to confusion to carefully worded acknowledgments that investigations were underway, 3,000 light-years away. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. High Arbiter Velthax's skin had turned a shade of black that none of his attendants had ever seen before. It was the color of absolute fury, of murderous rage barely contained. "Explain to me," he said, his voice deadly quiet, "how one human has exposed our presence to his entire species." Counselor Zix wished desperately that he could disappear. "High Arbiter, I attempted to warn the Council about this individual. The predictive algorithms clearly indicated. The predictive algorithms told us he was nobody. A broken human with no power, no influence, no importance whatsoever. Perhaps that was precisely why he was dangerous. He had nothing to lose." Velthax swept his massive arm through a holographic display, scattering data across the chamber. "Activate the contingency protocols. Full planetary destabilization. I want humanity so busy fighting itself that they forget about everything else." The orders went out within the hour. The Karathi hegemony had used these protocols many times before on primitive species who learned too much too quickly. They were subtle and effective. Economic manipulation through market disruptions. Political destabilization through carefully planted information. Social division through targeted influence campaigns. Within weeks, the effects became visible on Earth. Stock markets that had been stable for years suddenly collapsed. Long-standing peace agreements began to break down. Extremist movements that had been quiet for decades suddenly gained new energy and resources. But something unexpected happened. Humanity had spent thousands of years fighting among themselves. They had developed a deep understanding of manipulation, propaganda, and social engineering. They recognized the patterns. They saw the invisible hands pushing them toward conflict. And for the first time in their history, they refused to play along. It started as scattered resistance. A group of economists in Tokyo noticed patterns in the market manipulation and published their findings. Intelligence agencies from former rival nations began sharing information about suspicious activities. Religious leaders who had been at odds for centuries issued joint statements calling for unity. John Morrison watched it happen from a safe house in Virginia, where the government had placed him for his own protection. The same government that had covered up his brother's death was now treating him as a valuable asset. The public face of humanity's awakening. He received an invitation to address the United Nations General Assembly. It was the largest audience he had ever faced, and the most important speech he would ever give. He stood at the podium, looking out at representatives from every nation on Earth. The same nations that had been on the brink of war just weeks ago now sat together, waiting to hear what he had to say. They thought we were nothing, John said. They watched us from the stars and decided we did not matter. They thought we would destroy ourselves if they pushed the right buttons. They thought one human life, my brother's life, was just a number in their calculations. He paused, letting his words sink in. They were wrong. Every single person on this planet matters. Every life has value. And when you threaten one of us, you threaten all of us. The vote that followed was unanimous. Every nation present agreed to form a unified defense initiative. The petty differences that had divided humanity for centuries were set aside in the face of a greater threat. John Morrison, the construction worker from Ohio, had done something that conquerors and prophets had failed to achieve throughout all of human history. He had united the world. The Karathi Armada arrived on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. 300 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, filling the space between Earth and its moon with vessels of gleaming black metal. Each ship was massive, designed to inspire terror in the primitive species who dared to resist the hegemony's advance. High, Arbiter Velthax stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching the blue planet rotate slowly beneath him. After 5 years of waiting, of planning, of growing frustration at the delays caused by one inconsequential human, he was finally here to finish this. His broadcast went out on every frequency, in every human language. People of Earth, his translated voice boomed across the planet. Your resistance ends today. You have uncovered secrets that were not meant for your species. You have defied the authority of the Galactic Council. These crimes cannot go unpunished. Surrender now, disarm completely, and accept integration into the hegemony as a labor caste. Your independence will be stripped away. Your identity will be erased. But you will be allowed to live. Resist, and you will be destroyed completely. You have 1 hour to respond. In the command center beneath the Swiss Alps, John Morrison listened to the broadcast with his senior staff gathered around him. Amy Porter was running final checks on the fleet systems. Frank Casey was coordinating with defense commanders around the world. Katie Dunn and Pete Lawson were monitoring enemy communications, looking for any last-minute intelligence that could help. He's arrogant, Frank observed, giving us an hour to surrender. He thinks this is already over. John nodded slowly. That's because he's still looking at the old intelligence. He still thinks we're the same broken species we were 5 years ago. Should we respond? Yes, John said, but not the way he expects. The broadcast that went out from Earth was carried on every frequency, reaching not just the Karathi Armada, but every ship and station within range. John Morrison's face appeared on screens throughout the solar system. A middle-aged human with gray hair and tired eyes who somehow looked like the most dangerous man in the galaxy. "You classified me as inconsequential," John said. "You dismissed my brother's death as a footnote in your plans. You thought you could manipulate us into destroying ourselves, because that's what we've always done. You thought we would break under pressure and surrender our freedom without a fight." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You were wrong about all of it. We don't surrender. We don't give up. And we never, ever forget. This is our answer to your terms." The screen cut to a view of Earth's orbit, where something impossible was happening. Space itself seemed to tear open as hundreds of ships emerged from faster-than-light jumps. Ships built by human hands using principles stolen from the Karathi themselves. They were smaller than the enemy vessels, but they were fast and numerous, and they appeared directly inside the Karathi formation. High Arbiter Velthak's skin went white with shock. This was not possible. Humanity should not have faster-than-light capability for another 300 years, according to the projections. They should not have ships capable of engaging the Armada. They should not have known exactly where to emerge to cause maximum confusion. "All ships, defensive formation!" He screamed. "They're inside our perimeter." The battle for Earth had begun. Amy Porter's strike fighters moved like wasps among elephants. Their weapons designed specifically to exploit vulnerabilities in Karathi. Ships that the enemy did not know had been discovered. Every energy frequency, every shield modulation, every targeting system weakness had been studied and prepared for Frank Casey's ground-based defense networks activated across the planet, filling the sky with precision fire guided by real-time data from Pete Lawson's monitoring systems. The Karathi had never faced an enemy who could read their communications, who knew their tactics before they were deployed. The first Karathi ship exploded 43 minutes into the battle. Then another. Then 3 more. The impossible was happening. Primitive humans were actually damaging the fleet. Velthax ordered a concentrated assault on the main human defensive positions. He would overwhelm them with raw firepower, crush this unexpected resistance through sheer force. But the human ships did not behave like any enemy the Karathi had faced before. They did not form defensive lines to be broken. They did not retreat when threatened. Instead, they scattered and regrouped in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully coordinated, drawing the Karathi ships into positions where they could be isolated and destroyed. 5 hours into the battle, 60 Karathi ships had been destroyed or disabled. Human losses were significant but sustainable. The tide was turning. In the command center, John Morrison watched the battle unfold on holographic displays. He was not a military man. He did not understand the tactics and strategies that Frank Casey was directing. But he understood determination. He understood sacrifice. He understood what it meant to fight for something worth dying for. "They're retreating," Katie announced, her voice filled with disbelief. "The Karathi flagship is pulling back. The rest of the fleet is following." John watched the enemy ships begin their withdrawal, unable to quite believe what he was seeing. The armada that was supposed to crush humanity in hours was limping away after 7 hours of fighting, leaving behind over 80 destroyed vessels and countless dead. "We did it," Amy whispered. "We actually did it." But John knew this was not the end. The Karathi would return with a larger fleet. The Galactic Council would not accept this defeat. Humanity had won a battle, but the war was just beginning. He activated the global broadcast system one more time. "Today we proved something that the galaxy has forgotten. We proved that size and power and 10,000 years of conquest do not guarantee victory. We proved that a species united in purpose can stand against any threat. We proved that every single life matters, no matter how inconsequential it might seem to those who look down from the stars." He paused, thinking of Danny, thinking of everyone who had died to make this moment possible. This is not the end. They will come back. And when they do, we will be ready. Because that is what humans do. We adapt. We overcome. We survive. Across the planet, in bunkers and shelters and homes that had been waiting for destruction, people looked up at the sky where human ships were still patrolling. They had been told they were nothing, that their species was too primitive and too divided to matter. They had proven the galaxy wrong. The Galactic Council declared John Morrison inconsequential. It was the biggest mistake they ever made. 50 years later, the human alliance stretched across 100 worlds, a beacon of hope for every species that had ever been told they did not matter. And at the center of Unity Square in Geneva stood a monument to Danny Morrison, the soldier who died protecting evidence of first contact. The inscription read simply, "One life matters." They learned that the hard way. John Morrison, 93 years old and still sharp as ever, visited that monument every year. He would stand there in silence, remembering his brother, remembering the journey that began with a letter and the burning need for truth. The galaxy had learned its lesson. It had just taken one inconsequential human to teach it.